Hi then, Frank. As far as people are concerned, it all started for you when you came over from Australia. You had a hit song with I Remember You, and it all blossomed from there. But in fact, it started a long, long time before that.
Oh, yes, it did. It started back when I was about 13 years old. No, I started off, as I say, about 13 years old, professionally singing. And I was influenced, in fact, by country music very, very strongly, going right back when I was about 6 years old. And this is here in England. A lot of people probably don't realise it, but I was when I was born in England. I was born in Coventry, in England. And a lot of people think of me as being Australian. The reason for that being that my parents were over here when I was born. So they came over just prior to the war, and my father was at that time an engineer, and he came out here and he was involved in jetcraft and what have you in the early part of the war, you see. So when the war was over and rations were still going on at that stage, he had a lot of kids, and then the stage there were 7 of us all together in the family, which is a large family of all boys. And so he decided at that stage, he thought, well, with the rations and what have you, it wasn't good enough to live in Britain, and he wanted to take his children out to Australia where they could kick their shoes off and feel free. And that's the reason, in fact, that we went back to Australia. And, growing up in Australia, I was surrounded by country music. I'd become au fait with country music, as I say, when I was 6 years old with a program called Big Bill Campbell and his Rocky Mountaineers. There'd be 1 or 2, perhaps, of the patients that would remember that far back. But that was where I first got my influence, and it went on from there. When I got to Australia, I was very much involved with this kind of music, and I recall my grandma, in fact, buying for me a guitar, which she thought was a guitar. Actually, it was a ukulele, but she didn't know any different. And I learned to play the ukulele and sang some songs, and just suddenly came up with the yodeling, you see. And I can remember bailing my mother up in the kitchen and doing a song for her, which I'd just made up. And I yodeled to her, and the first time she'd heard me yodeling, she said, well, that's funny, it came out in you, because I've always wanted to be able to do that. And so somewhere in the family, it must have, in her side, it must have come out in me, Although I do, in some ways, come from the theatrical family, although not my immediate family. My father had a brother and 2 sisters, in fact, that were involved in show business in minor forms, One was a soprano singer, and the other was a tenor. And of course, my grandfather, who implemented... Good night. Some of the ladies saying good night. What was I saying? Oh, yes, about my grandfather. He taught me lots of songs. He was more or less a folk singer way back in the early days of Australia. And in fact, he used to work with a show called the Nigger Minstrel Show. This is way back in the early pioneering days of Australia.
The black and white.
That's right, it was. And he was in that show and toured throughout Australia for many years. And he was a fascinating character, and he encouraged me a tremendous amount, my old granddad did. And even at the age, he died at the age of 89, but I knew him very well, even up to, say, the age of 82, 83. He could tap dance even then, and he could sing a good song. And he was a brilliant man, I totally enjoyed his company. And I gained a lot of enthusiasm from him and from my mother and my father, and that's where I actually got the courage to, in fact, first go up on stage and do my first professional show.
It was inevitable, wasn't it?
Well, it was for me, although all my brothers are musically inclined too. Most of them play guitar or piano and other instruments, and they all sing a bit. In fact, one did dabble a little bit in show business and did very well. The only trouble is, at that time, I had made a hit, and he was always asked to do my hits because it wasn't his thing. He didn't want to do that, which is fair enough. But so he gave it up. In the family, there's always been some sort of form of show business that's been going on, and it's really influenced me tremendously.
You made records in Australia?
Oh yes. In fact, I had the whether it's a good thing or a bad thing. I was at one stage the artist that made the largest number of records in the world, next to Peter Dawson.
Really?
Because I was literally recording sort of one or two records, sort of releasing one or two a month, at one stage, which was a tremendous amount. And they all came out on the old Beatles Renaissance label. I don't know whether you remember that label, and the green and red band, in the days of 78.
We've got about 10,000 of those Beatles Renaissance records in our library, actually.
Really?
Yeah, we get donations from people.
And I remember recording for that label for many, many years. And I, in fact, got my break. Can I tell you about this? Because it's rather involved. It really is a bit of cheek on my behalf. But of course, it started off when I was young enough to sort of be able to get away with a bit of cheek. And I was still going to school at the time, and I was desperate to record. And in fact, what I did, I went to a publishing company, which was recommended to me by a professional entertainer at the time, and he said to me, go down to the publishing company and get some new material. You see, a lot of the material was coming in from the States that we couldn't get hold of. So I went down to the publishing company and chatted with the secretary and to get an appointment to see the man in charge. And he was, unfortunately, or fortunately, just whichever way you look at it, was just about to go out to lunch. So he said to me, well, you have to be recording before I can just let you have a listen to the material. So I told a little white lie and said, well, I am recording. And he said, well, who are you recording with? So I thought of the biggest name possible, and in fact, I was going to go over and see them anyway, so I happened to mention a man by the name of Ron Wills, who works for EMI, you see. And he said, oh, I knew Ron Wills, so he said, I'll check your story out. But he said, in the meantime, I've got a luncheon date. Go and have a listen to some of the music. So I went and locked myself into the room and listened to some of these new releases from the States. Now, I've got a very quick ear for music, and I can pick lyrics up very quickly, and I pick up a tune very quickly. So I happened to come across two or three really good songs, so I sort of logged them in the head, you see, and then I walked out and I said, look, I won't wait for Alan to come back, you say, because I have to go over to the recording studio, because I wanted to bail the other guy back before he came back from lunch and before they could check my story, you see. Yeah. So what happened was this Ron Wills from EMI came through the door, and I sort of bailed him up in the corner. I said, you've got to listen to me. I've got 3 songs I want you to hear. And I sang these 3 songs for him, you see. And he was most impressed, partly by my cheek, for having the gall to sort of bail him up, as it were, before he got into his office. And he said to me, yes, he said, I like the songs. He said, you're certainly worthy of consideration. But he said, before we record anybody, you've got to be, to do some major radio program, because radio was the only thing in those days. There wasn't television. And so I quickly thought again, and I said, well, I've got Australia's Amateur, which was the big national hookup radio thing, which I didn't have, but I knew I wouldn't have any problem getting that by saying that I was recording, you see. So, in fact, he said, well, I'll check that story out. He said, well, when are you doing it? I said, well, the date hasn't been fixed yet, you say, but I'll ring you back and let you know the date. Dashed over to the radio station, told them I was recording already, and I wanted to go on the program. So there's no problem. I got on the program, rang Ron Wills back, and backtracked the story, you say. So it all fell into line, and it wasn't until a couple of years later on they realised how much I diddled them. But in fact, the first record I had out was a hit, and it was one with a dreadful title of "Did You See My Daddy, Mr. Soldier?" which was a heart-rending story about some little boy who was looking out for his father who died in the Vietnam War. Not the Vietnam War, the Korean War. So it was, I'll never forget that. But that sort of made a hit for me, and of course it established my recording career, and from there on I just went on and on recording ad infinitum, virtually.
First ever recording?
Yeah. I was 13 at that time. I was still going to school. And just after that, when I left school, I went into it permanently.
Can you remember what the 3 songs were that kind of set you off on this road?
Well, that was one of them. No, I can't remember the other one. There was one that was a yodeling song, I seem to recall. A thing called Love Not on My Lariat. That's right, there was a Love Not on My Lariat. Well, yes, he's done it as well, but it goes back even further than that. It's Montana Slims and what was his name? Wolf Carter.
Oh.
Yeah, it was one of his early ones, And but I did that, and I can't remember what the third one was now, just offhand, but those two I can still remember today, actually. I can still remember the lyrics of them.
Do you ever have any pangs of conscience over this episode?
Not at all. It's strange that they seem the man who, from the publishing company, who was in fact, when I came out to England, he was involved with the publishing company here. And he was one of my first contacts when I got here, So, and of course, as many people think, I Remember You was the first record here. It's the first one they probably know me for, although some of them probably would cast their minds back to about 1960. They'd probably remember a song called Lucky Devil, which was a big hit for me. And I followed that one up with Gotta Get a Date With You and Alone Too Long. Yes, that's right. That's right. Do you remember some of it? Although they weren't sort of number one hits for me, they were all sort of chart contenders, they were sort of in the top 30, as it were.
Got your name bandied about a bit.
Yeah. Well, that sort of opened many doors for me and got to started my career going here in Britain.
At what point did you decide to come to England? Was that because of your career or was it family? No,
I'd got to the point where I thought at that stage that I'd done everything that Australia could offer me, because I'd done sort of radio, all the radio programs, the big radio programs, and when television started off there, in fact, I had the first show on television, a thing called Campfire Favourites, and it was a little starring role that I had on television in the early days. Dreadful show. Pretty dreadful.
You've got a similar campfire thing, haven't you, on Stars and Sunday?
Well, no, not really. It's no, it was different from different context. I mean, that is yeah. But I mean, in the respect that there's been a campfire, isn't it? Yes, that kind of thing. Yeah, it's a very easy show to do. It was nice and relaxed show, and in that respect, it was probably similar to that kind of thing I'm doing on that.
So how did you come to find I Remember You then, which is going to be one of the big things in your life? Surely.
Well, I guess, I must be a very lucky person. I just sort of drop lucky every once in a while. Tell you for why that happened. I was recording it with Norrie Paramore, who I have a great respect for, and nobody could be luckier than to land somebody like Norrie Paramore as an A&R man, artist and repertoire man. And yeah, he's tremendous, he really is. He was recording me right from the start when I first came over to Britain. And what happened was that after a period of time, I wasn't getting any more hits. No more hits on the top 20 charts, And what happened was that my recording career was about running up to the end when I had a 2-year recording contract. And towards the last month of the recording contract, when they weren't going to re-sign me on, because I hadn't had any big records, at that time I came up with a song, I Remember You. And I sang it to Norrie Paramore, and he wasn't not impressed particularly. He knew the song, very much an old torch song, sort of a jazz classic really. And he didn't really see what I was doing with the song was a bit sacrilege as far as he was concerned, because he hadn't heard that sort of treatment of it. He wasn't delighted about recording it, but my manager said to him, well, look, you might as well give him a go and let him record it. He's got a lot of faith in it. I mean, after all, it's his last record. What difference does it make to you, if it's his last record in his recording contract? So now he came back in again and said, okay, we'll have a bash at it. And I put it down with a guitar on the tape for him to go away and do an arrangement of. And he did this arrangement, and he sort of did it very much with tongue-in-cheek, because if you remember the harmonica phrase in it, it's da-da-da-da-dum, which is the first line of Waltzing Matilda. It was very much tongue-in-cheek. But of course, the whole record did happen, and it turned out very well. A lot of the business when it first came out didn't like it, didn't think it was going to be a hit, but it was, beyond my wildest dreams. I gave myself 5 years to make it when I came out, and made it, in fact, in much less. So once that had happened for me, it was, more or less smooth sailing.
It was a pretty ginormous hit.
Yeah. In fact, although I never really regarded myself as a recording artist. Although I have recorded, It's not been my mainstay of the profession. I love show business from the point of view of live performance. I love to work in front of an audience. To me, records are only part of our business, and to me, a fairly small part of the business. Although it is an absolute necessity, I think, from the point of view of promotion for a performer. Once you've got that promotion, I think the rest, it doesn't really matter after that. You don't have to keep on going on and on, getting hit after hit to prove that anymore once you've done it,
No.
I think that, well, yes, it gives you another boost of promotion, but I mean, that's the only way I look at it now.
Yeah.
In fact, that's the only way I've ever looked at it. Nobody was more surprised than I was to find out that number one hit was, a few gold records down the belt. No, I certainly didn't expect that. Yeah.
Because you're number one with, I remember you in Britain, but also in America. Now.
Yes, they both ran simultaneously, actually, in America and in England at the same time, also in Australia at the same time. Yeah. And of course, it went on even after it dropped right out of the charts in Britain. It was popping up in some obscure places like Bangkok and Thailand and some even weirder places than that. There were places I've never even seen. And even today I could still pick up charts around the places and suddenly it appears in some weird and wonderful place.
Really?
Well, it's not only with Iron and You, of course, it's with a lot of other records too. Some of the records which have never come into light here have in fact been enormous sellers in weird places, funny places. I'll give you an example. I had an enormous hit with a thing called Joanne just recently, which I released here in this country, didn't mean a thing. But I had an enormous hit on the continent with it. It sold $1 million and they made another gold record for me out there. And I got my first gold LP out of that too. So I'd never had a gold LP before. A million sales on an LP is quite a bit of doing. It takes a lot more doing than a million sales of a single.
When you went to number one in America with I Remember You, were you tempted then to leave Britain and try and
No.
go over the States?
No. Well, yes, I made a go in the States, but I wouldn't want to leave Britain to do so.
That's what I meant.
No, you see, one has to take in consideration that since all that had happened, and I really sort of got my enormous hits in the States, I became married in the meantime. And it wasn't long before I had my first child. So now there's no way in the world I would want to live in America. With due respect to any Americans listening, I just wouldn't want to live there. I just feel my roots are here in Britain, and I love Britain. And if it were a choice of moving out of Britain, I'd go back to Australia. From my family's point of view, I wouldn't. I don't think I'd go to America to live. But I love to go there and perform, and I think it's a very, very professional standard that they have in show business there. But it's a question of living, and I don't think I could live in the States.
Gillian is British, of course.
Yeah, she is. She's born in Wallasey in Cheshire. But, as I say, I'd go and live in Australia, but I don't think there's nowhere else I'd particularly want to live, apart from Britain. And I just happen to like it here. I like the way of life here. The weather's not all it should be, but nonetheless, it's the only country in the world where you get weather. Everywhere else you get climate.
Apart from your incredible success on record, and you've also been very successful on television, you've made one film, I think, Jolly Swagman.
Yes, it was a dreadful film too. Well, it was as far as I was concerned.
Did it make you want to stop ever considering films again, or?
No, quite the opposite. In fact, it made me want to do more films. I wanted to prove that I could do it. I didn't like the subject. In fact, it happened at a particular period of time when just the mention of "would you like to do a film" made me say, "Yeah, great," without going into it too deeply to find out what the film was all about. It was just the glory of making a film. If I'd have really thought about it a bit more serious than that, I would have said, no, you find me the right film and I'd do it. But at that stage, I just jumped headlong into doing anything, And I I've always been a bit like that anyway.
This is sort of period when all the pop stars were offered films.
And they were all dreadful standard, really, or the majority of them were, when I say dreadful standard, I mean, they were enjoyable for what they were. But they weren't the sort of standard that, to me, I mean, I'm a mad movie fan. I love movies. And I'd rather have acted in a bit part in a big budget film, where I could have done an acting part and got my teeth into something, rather than do this sort of small budget B film. That's the way I look at it. I mean, Britain makes some great films, but she makes terrible musicals. Most of the musicals I've seen that have been made in Britain by British budget have been dreadful. When they've been backed by an American budget, they come off trumps, and there are many British musical stars that are world class and world renowned, but invariably you'll find that there's sort of American backing. When you look at Julie Andrews and there's loads of them, Tommy Steele. When you look at the standard is high because it's really American money that backs them then. Whereas I feel that the budget films that you were talking about, if you made a hit, you were stuck into a song like, yes, well, there was loads of them at that stage, and they're not very good films. They were just sort of stuck together, really. Yeah.
And apart from all this, now you've also been into songwriting in your time.
Well, I always have been a songwriter as such, if you can call it that. I write for my own amusement. And occasionally I come up with something that I think, that's worth recording, you see. But many songs I've written, I don't record, but I do enjoy writing. Same as I enjoy good poetry, and I enjoy writing poetry as well, and I enjoy the challenge of writing. I enjoy writing books and scripts. I've never had one published yet, but I still enjoy doing it, it's my own pleasure. And I look back at them now and think they're probably dreadful, but on the other hand, at the time I was writing it, I thought they were the best thing in the world. That's all part of, I suppose, trying to extend your sort of talents to the foremost, as much as you can.
I read something very funny in the paper today. It was all about this chap who was taken to court. He was a peace marcher. Mm-hmm. He was taken to court for causing public nuisance of himself by fighting, which I thought was quite funny. And it made me think about you coming along tonight. Who did the...
That's funny. Do you always get into balls coming down here to see me?
Who does the singer listen to when he's relaxing? Now, who do you listen to?
Who do I listen to when I'm relaxing? I like to listen to orchestral material. Strange as it may seem, I very rarely sit down and listen to music. If I'm relaxing, I listen to chat programs. I listen to Radio 4 most of the time. If it's music I want for relaxing at home, then I will listen to orchestral music. I suppose you must take in consideration it's a bit like, I suppose, a painter. When he gets home, he doesn't want to paint his own house. Yeah. And I don't really listen to a great deal of songs or singers for pleasure, I'm talking about. I do for work. I'm listening to them all the time for work. But not for pleasure. I tend to sort of listen to orchestral music. I'm very fond of orchestral music, although there are many singers that I do enjoy listening to. I used to enjoy very, very much listening to people like Brooke Benton and Dinah Washington and Sarah Vaughan. Although they're miles away, really, from what I do. There is a slight influence, I suppose, in certain things that I do because of listening to them, but very little, but most of my influence, of course, is country and western.
Yeah.
And I listen to a lot of that. I do enjoy country. I go from one end of the spectrum to the other. From one moment I'm listening to, Buck Owens, and the other end of the spectrum I'm listening to Johnny Spade. It's a completely different field. And then I'll listen to, many of the classics too. So it's a wide band of things that entertain me. But I always really come back to country because I just adore country music.
In the many years that you've been in the business, is there any one thing above all that has given you greater pleasure than anything else?
There are many highlights in my career that have given